Welcome to the 2021 California Ocean and Climate Justice Summit, co-hosted by the Resource Center for Nonviolence and Save Our Shores. I'm Sylvia Morales, Executive Director of the Resource Center for Nonviolence.
And I'm Gail McNulty, Senior Manager for Communications and Climate Action with Save Our Shores. Today's summit stems from our vision to inspire California to recognize how its diverse population, cultural influence, vast wealth, and startup mindset can be essential collective forces to regenerate our ocean and lands and launch a just, sustainable global future. Let's take a moment to express gratitude and acknowledge the past that has led up to today's virtual summit. Acknowledging the land is a transformative act that works to undo the intentional erasure of Indigenous peoples and is a first step in decolonizing land relations. Save Our Shores and the Resource Center for Nonviolence are both based in Santa Cruz, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Yupi tribe of the Awaswa-speaking peoples. They and their ancestors have continually occupied the greater Monterey Bay region, thriving for thousands of years and countless generations prior to European contact. We acknowledge that this summit is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. We honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide.
It is equally important to acknowledge that BIPOC communities have long suffered under the weight of the oppressive and unjust systems that are also destroying the planet. Despite this, African American, Latinx, Asian, Indigenous people, and other people of color have played a crucial role in the development of the United States and California, and have been front and center of every movement for social transformation throughout the world. Amplifying stories and solutions from emerging BIPOC, ocean, and climate justice leaders during today's summit is both a continuation of this legacy and a recognition of the need to reconcile our past as we move forward in healing and reparation. Centuries of colonization have separated all humans from their ancestral wisdom and their innate connection to nature and the planet. Reconnecting to this wisdom, which is alive in all of us, is a first step to healing ourselves and our shared future.
Over the last few years, amidst our nation's struggle toward racial and social justice, Save Our Shores was among those organizations questioning and seeking to integrate the call for environmental justice into our vision, mission, values, and more importantly, our actions. Collaborating with Resource Center for Nonviolence in the creation of the California Ocean and Climate Justice Mini Fellowship and Summit is a step in that direction.
The Resource Center for Nonviolence has served the Santa Cruz community since 1976 in the areas of peace, nonviolent action, and social and racial justice. We are committed to providing community-based, grassroots-oriented, accessible, and high-caliber education, training, and support as a way forward. Partnering with Save Our Shores to host his first annual California Ocean and Climate Justice Mini Fellowship and Summit is part of our Transformative Justice Leadership Initiative and our ongoing anti-racism work.
Congratulations to our 2021 California Ocean and Climate Justice Fellows. We hope you have had a chance to read all of the fellows' bios and the promotional materials for this summit. If you'd like to revisit their bios or contact any of the fellows, please visit bit.ly/CAEJ Summit. We'll put the link in the chat now. We hope to have time for audience questions after we hear from all of our fellows. Please type your questions in the chat and we will collect them and ask as many as possible after the presentations. And I'm going to put the link in the chat right now for the bios and contact information for our fellows.
We're going to go ahead and do a short meditation just to settle into the event and really have some good intentions throughout this presentation. It'll help us feel grounded and open. It'll be about 3 minutes. So feel free to close your eyes or leave your eyes open, whatever you're comfortable with. So we'll go ahead and get started. Take a moment to get rooted in your body by noticing your breath and your body for a moment. Invite trusted powers as your resources, whatever they may be for you, whether it be God, earth, ancestors, love and kindness, to be with you right now. Let go of any harmful, negative, intrusive interference and negativity. Recognize that you are part of the web of life on our planet. And go ahead and envision what it means to have a cultural shift that values our connections to one another. Go ahead and imagine a story about your healing and the earth's healing. And then finally, seek inner wisdom in this final step and ask yourself, is there anything that you need to hear as we begin this experience together? Michelle Sevilla, she, they, was raised in the Philippines and identifies as Filipinx. Having grown up in a country deeply troubled by multinational corporate resource extraction, where indigenous land protectors are regularly assassinated, Michelle feels compelled to use her privilege and free speech to protect the environment. Michelle's 8-minute video includes references to sexual violence. Feel free to use your own discretion as to how or if you want to view it.
Some years ago, I was in the middle of a personal crisis. I ended up on the corner entrance of my neighborhood near my family's home on the phone with my abusive, adult, U.S. military boyfriend. He was describing in detail all of the ways he was going to hurt me because of some imagined wrong I had done him. My heart sank with each car that rolled by as I sat on the corner, clutching the phone to my ear. My distress, shame, and fear on full display. I took the passing of each car as a dismissal of me and my pain. I was only 16 years old, and dozens of cars and people passed me by without stopping to help, except for one. He seemed to me a younger man with a modest car. He turned the corner but pulled off to the side and parked his car. He opened his door and approached me and asked, "Are you okay? Where are your parents? How can I help?" I clung to my phone. I knew that if I made what my abusive boyfriend perceived as another mistake that night, like speak out of turn or give my attention to anyone else, the punishment and barrage of death threats would escalate. But as a vulnerable victim of abuse, I did what many others like me would do. I lied to the man trying to help me. Without making a sound, I had to assure him I was fine. He reluctantly hesitated. He asked me if I was sure. There is no one with greater assurance than a desperate, lonely person in survival mode. I refused his kindness again. Still, the man returned to his car, opened his trunk, and came back to me with a battered box of tissues. So how does this painful experience relate to environmental degradation and the climate crisis. Lots of water has passed under the bridge since then, and against all odds, and my abuser's many attempts to sabotage me, I fulfilled my dream of going to university. It was there I took a course called Environmental Justice in Asia with Professor Anne-Elise Llewellyn that the intersectionality became clear to me. Violence against the environment is parallel and always nearly equates to the violence against women and our non-conforming neighbors. The similarities are especially pronounced with the involvement of military powers, the underpinnings of colonization on the feminine body, human and landmass, and what is well known now as environmental racism. My adult abuser made it clear that he had bantered with fellow US Marines on the tropes of an exotic Filipina woman, fetishizing me for his own gain. He expressed pride in conquering me and my child body, though at 24, he was an adult and knew it was a crime. I come from the Philippines, a country that was once a US colony and still has 20 US military bases today. This continued occupation has given way to the exploitation of not only these lands, but of the women and children who live there. One high-profile example being Jennifer Ganda Loud, who was murdered at the hands of US Marine Joseph Pemberton. I survived what I see now as a violent reenactment of these powers' occupation, the vice grip my home country and many others experience when violence is perpetrated upon their lands. We have chosen to deem spaces where people live, harvest, work, and play as sacrifice zones. We deem the people who live there and their bodies subject to certain authority, malleable, exotic, therefore conquerable, and ultimately disposable. The violence of colonization is being enacted at home and abroad. And climate change is another manifestation of colonization, where the affluent exploit our Earth's atmosphere and natural resources, including water, forests, and land, for their personal gains and national interests, and the greatest suffering is endured by the marginalized. Looking away is a choice. Passing by is a choice. Willfully not seeing what is happening to vulnerable, marginalized people all over the world at this moment is a choice. That night, so many years ago, dozens of people chose to leave me there. They had the privilege of looking at my distress and easily walking away from it. As a survivor of military domestic abuse in a statutory relationship, I would have been saved from a terrible amount of pain if someone made my observable suffering their business. Because when we see others being hurt, we have to make it our business. When it comes to climate crisis, we look away when we don't want to consider our role or participation in the system that created the violence, inequity, and injustice we see bearing down on the less fortunate, usually BIPOC communities, as the planet heats up and the world scrambles for resources. How will we ensure the powerful and the wealthy find the compassion and empathy to witness our pain and disrupt this violence? We must make our environmental pain their business, because it is their business. And for every person of privilege willing to do the work, to see beyond their own ease and comfort or position related to climate crisis, who works to accept responsibility for where we are now, who works to ease the suffering of those less fortunate of those marginalized, of those occupied and colonized. I want to say to you what I wish I could have said to the one person who stopped to help me that night. Thank you. My name is Michelle Irabon Sevilla, and I want you to understand that violence against lands means violence against people.
Next, we will watch Paige Tengeluk, she, her, was born, raised in Saipan, and identifies as Pacific Islander. Palauan, Paige is passionate about decolonizing our lands, cultures, and lifestyles because she is tired of watching Indigenous people and lands being destroyed by capitalism.
I was born and raised on the island of Saipan, located in the South Pacific. Growing up, I saw my family and community continue their traditional work in environmental stewardship. I remember during grade school, each class would take a trip to the beach, which was about 10 minutes away from the school, and participate in beach cleanups. This became routine for many students throughout the school system, and we saw it more as a gift and responsibility to be a part of the natural world and help take care of it. At the age of 12, my family and I relocated to the United States. Leaving my homeland was tough for me because I was afraid of what was waiting for us on the other side of the world. As soon as I stepped foot in our new home, Las Vegas, Nevada, all I remember thinking was, wow, there isn't that much greenery in this area or nature in the environment. I remember the drive from the airport to our new home and seeing all the huge buildings and casinos along the strip. I instantly saw and felt how disconnected people were from nature. I vividly remember seeing a man spit his gum on the ground. I thought about my home and how we made an effort to be stewards of our land. Now, living in the United States, one of the richest nations in the world, and seeing the disrespect and disconnect many of the people in America have toward the natural environment is something that I just can't grasp. I'm still shocked about it. 2016 marked 10 years of my residency in the United States. We watched as the climate crisis deepened. That same year, one of the strongest El Nino events ever recorded occurred in my homeland. This event caused the largest drought they've ever experienced, reducing and in some places eliminating access to their clean, drinkable water and prompting the island officials to announce a state of emergency. Families overseas began sending balls of water to my homeland to keep them afloat while the government looked for solutions to the emergency. This event reactivated and deepened my connection to land. I remember watching this drought take place for what seemed like forever and finding myself feeling hopeless being so far away here on the other side of the world. I felt the need to take action the only way I could to regain some sense of control, and that was to be intentional about my lifestyle. 2016 is the year I went vegan. The US is the biggest producer of agricultural farming, and my choice of going vegan and not supporting the meat and dairy industry is part of my sustainability approach. As I think about colonization and the way it affects Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, this choice is one that has helped me decolonize my diet as well. I'm not going to dwell on the past. That drought has since passed, and due to ongoing climate work, my homeland is the first nation in the world to require tourists to sign an environmental pledge upon arrival. It's called an eco-pledge. Upon entry, visitors sign a passport pledge to act in an ecologically and culturally responsible way on the island for the sake of Palau's children and for future generations. The disconnect I felt when I first arrived, and still feel now residing in the United States, compels me to be a voice for those who are marginalized. I am advocating for Black, Indigenous, people of color who are oftentimes ignored and denied access to conversations and policy around major environmental issues. Why? We are already seeing the effects of the climate crisis. Many island nations are disappearing due to rising sea levels, leaving thousands of climate crisis refugees in their wake. My homeland is seeing parts of the island washed over as the sea rises. Even though news outlets are highlighting these issues, the general public doesn't seem to sense the danger and urgency. Even as a child, I understood the disconnect between humans and nature was a sickness. I know it even deeper as an adult with the privilege of gaining higher education. I know I'm fortunate to be able to pursue work on a climate crisis through a more personal, broader lens. What I deeply understand is that historically marginalized communities are a huge, largely untapped and critical part of the solution. We have so much generational knowledge. Our relationship with the natural environment has been cultivated throughout centuries of knowledge and practices. And as long as most environmental and climate work is dominated by white folks who study other cultures, we are limiting our ability to apply these deep generational knowledge. It is my work to bring Black, Indigenous, people of color's wisdom and knowledge to the center of the solutions conversation. There is no successful pathway forward without our voices and knowledge. I am here to shine a light on this crisis so developed nations like the United States can take accountability for their actions and start making changes to consider and maximize the health and well-being of Indigenous people and the planet. My name is Paige, and I'm bringing Indigenous solutions to the table.
Next, we will hear from Layla Scott. Layla Scott, she, they, grew up in Oakland, California, and identifies as African American Black. Knowing that we are running out of time to regain our relationship to the natural world, Layla urges fellow BIPOC leaders to learn about the politics of water, then step up and center themselves to protect Mother Earth and those suffering from polluted water supplies.
I'm a queer Black woman from Oakland, California. My passion for water emerged at a young age. I attended an inclusive, progressive academic space as a young girl, fortunate to be exposed to LGBTQ, nature, other religious and spiritual philosophies, a very safe space for a growing mind. My school introduced me to nature through camping, ocean adventures, playing on the beach, and exploring tide pools. Exposure to nature most young Black children from East Oakland do not experience. So my foundation, my connection to nature was nurtured and is part of who I am. Nature calls out to me. I currently attend the University of California, Santa Cruz, UCSC. Santa Cruz is a nature-rich environment, deceivingly beautiful, peaceful, serene. But my idea of what the state of nature, the environment was actually clouded by the beauty of my campus. I had a general sense, of what was going on in climate change. The air quality was getting worse, deforestation, carbon footprints. But it wasn't until I took a sustainable water systems course when I actually realized I did not know a thing about what was going on with Earth's water. Feeling blindsided, my cracking open to the truth about what I feel now is a global countdown. Water sustains life. Food, humans can go weeks without, but water, 3 days without it, and you die. Now sit with that. 3 days, that's it, you die. This is a common fact, we know it. So you would think as humans, we would preserve and protect water as it is sacred, the key to life. But instead, natural watersheds, oceans, bodies of water are being tainted and polluted. We're destroying the very source we need to survive, or we die in 3 days without. It makes no sense. International and U.S. conflict over natural resources have been present for decades. Impoverished communities, mostly Black and brown, are already suffering from water pollution and inaccessibility. The water that is available to them is poisoned, and if not poisoned, it cannot be accessed without going through great lengths to retrieve it. Here in California, we are suffering from excess water usage and a historical drought, causing low-income and marginalized communities to suffer as their access to water becomes difficult and constricted. Rural California communities, their wells are drying up. My community knows very little about water, and it's time that we BIPOC individuals understand and acknowledge that we have been too far removed, too far disconnected to nature in a way that we no longer carry the knowledge or relationship to this critical element deemed sacred by our ancestors and our cultures. We are running out of time to reclaim our relationship to the natural world. You may not think you can reclaim this space, but you can. Why not you? How can we do this? We can work on reconnecting children from low-income communities and oppressed communities to nature with programs dedicated to rebuilding that foundational relationship. We can and must create and support programs to introduce children to water testing, implementing hydrology testing classes in schools to learn the scientific and immoral aspects of water access and management. Programs to connect future generations to nature, to camping, to see, to feel, to smell an actual redwood forest. The importance of water is generational and universal. All living things, all living beings, all cultures and communities. We must work on deprogramming the concept that going into and exploring nature is just a leisure activity white people do, and not a space for BIPOC folks. We can reclaim that space and our place in it. We are running out of time. Capital elites know this. They know how sacred water is. There is a whole global capital industry built on just bottling your tap water and making you pay for it. About a decade ago, the United Nations declared safe and clean drinking water and sanitation a human right essential to the full enjoyment of life. But more water utilities are falling under private ownership and control. Corporations and the wealthy 1% making money off of what most of us consider a basic human right. We are losing control over who has access to clean water. But controlling water rights won't insulate the wealthy from the climate crisis. That's the thing about polluting the environment. Money cannot stop Mother Nature. 3 days without water and you die. That goes for every single human being, no matter rich or poor. BIPOC leaders can step up and center ourselves, become the leaders to protect our Mother Earth and fight for those suffering from polluted environments. We have a right to clean water, yes, but we also have a responsibility to protect clean water and access to it. So I'm advocating for Black and brown folks, take back, reclaim your connection to nature and water. It is our responsibility to understand the politics of water, know who is in our city's water board, educate ourselves about the water issues in our communities. East Oakland is only an hour away from Santa Cruz, but the two cities couldn't be more different. Children in Santa Cruz are learning about the San Lorenzo River. They're studying marine biology and tide pools at the ocean. They have surf clubs and sailing clubs at their school. Children in BIPOC communities deserve that too. I can't live with the idea that we would leave them a world that is waterless, that is lifeless. Understanding each other and the importance of water will be the only way we save life on Earth. Without water, every living thing will suffer. Many species of plants and animals have already become extinct as climate crisis bears down on us. We are running out of time. I am a BIPOC leader. Water has called to me to defend her, to protect her. It only takes 3 days until you die without water. I'm calling out to BIPOC communities, reclaim your space, reclaim your place in nature, reclaim your connection to water, create programs for future generations to build a foundational relationship to our oceans, to lakes, to rivers, to reservoirs, to water, to life. For it is the only thing that will save us all. Water is life. My name is Layla Scott. I am a warrior and a voice for water.
Next, we will hear from Ware. Ware, his, grew up in Conyers, a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. As a Black male, Will's drive to connect conservation and social justice inspires him to bring an equitable lens to fishing practices in hopes of cultivating a better future for fishing communities across California.
It's time. Though the seas are rising, they cannot quench the smoldering ashes in the hills. Social inequity grows as cities are trapped in the closing space. That's the truth. But there's more to our story. Close your eyes. When I close my eyes, I see blackness. The humid night air as I leave the Georgia Aquarium. A homeless man vies for attention in the sea of people, and he looks more like me than others around. My dad guides me along the Atlanta streets, and I follow him as I learn to give to those in need and make a career out of my passions. College pressures me to choose between conservation or social justice as I learn about marine science. Courses teach me about all aspects of the ecosystem in detail, but they skim over fishers like boats rushing out to sea. Outside of the classroom, I interview fishers on the side of a highway. A nurse in scrubs, a man with a cane pole rather than a rod and reel. A woman with 2 kids that she is trying to feed. Professors only mention white men having fun in expensive boats, or tribal people in faraway places. But these people are right around the corner. Researchers and resource managers knew about them, but no one was addressing their concerns. Imagine recreational fishing in California. What comes to mind? Nature? Fun? Leisure? Picture connection, well-being, and culture. People fish to connect with nature, have fun while supporting themselves and others, and keep their way of lives intact. Native, Black, Latinx, Asian, and people of mixed descent have fished California's waterways for generations. They still do. Systemic racism exposes non-white, low-income, immigrant, and non-English speaking communities to high amounts of environmental pollution. Many studies in California show that these marginalized groups eat lots of fish and shellfish from their local waterways. They may or may not know about consumption advisories, but they still eat. Why? There are many reasons. The advisories don't always resonate with the cultural backgrounds of the people they intend to reach. It's difficult for people to balance risks and benefits of seafood consumption, and quite frankly, they need food. Catches provide protein, vitamins, minerals that can be cheaper than seafood from restaurants and stores. Just like commercial seafood that you buy from stores, pollution and natural sources of contamination go into them. This balance of risks and benefits includes the seafood that people eat, where it's captured, how much and how often they eat it. When the balance is done right, recreational fishing can support the food security, well-being, and culture of marginalized communities. After I left that highway, I also interviewed fishers at the Santa Cruz Wharf. I wanted to learn more about their perspectives. Just like balancing risks and benefits, fishing regulations are also confusing, and they change without input from diverse fishers. Public meetings on regulatory change are not well advertised, and the fishers that do attend are part of organizations. They don't reflect most of the fishers out there. Management decisions affect all kinds of people. Natural resources are held in the public trust for all Californians, but many fishers are unable to offer their perspectives on regulations. Although fishers and managers both recognize the need for education and outreach, more work needs to be done. I see collaboration and communication like water that flows from truth to justice. Trying to promote collaboration and communication, I have connected with staff and government agencies responsible for managing fish and contaminants in water that affect human health. I've interviewed fishers, and I've collaborated with organizations that research fish and environmental conditions. Promoting a shared understanding between fishers, agencies, and organizations can lead to collaborative solutions that balance competing management goals. The risks and benefits of seafood consumption, conservation of fisheries, and support of communities that rely on them, and enforcement of regulations, and improving connections with fishers. These are conflicting objectives. Ivory towers stand in the closing gap between the rising seas and the smoldering hills of California. But researchers and managers can no longer stay in them. We all need to promote a shared understanding between fishers, managers, and organizations with simple actions. Search online for consumption advisories in your local area on the website for the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. Pressure the California State Legislature to require more research on environmental contaminants and updated consumption advisories. Eat local fish and shellfish captured by fishers in your community. We are rising like the seas. The fire in your eyes sees beyond the ashes. Lessons from our ancestors guide us beyond this closing space, beyond the pressure that closes us in. And our hunger for justice grows faster than social inequity. Imagine a better future for fishing communities across California. Open your eyes. It's time. My name is Ware, and I help guide wildlife managers and policymakers out of ivory towers where fishers wait outside.
Next, we will watch Elizabeth Hernandez, she, her. She identifies as Mexicana and was born and raised in Watsonville, California. Her parents have lived in the Pajaro Valley and worked in the strawberry fields for 15 plus years. Elizabeth is pursuing environmental justice for her community and telling the complex story of how our food arrives from farm to table.
Can you see what I have right here? I have a delicious, scrumptious strawberry that brings so much joy when you take a bite from it. I see more than that. I see a fragile fruit that represents the campesinos, my community. Let me tell you a story of an 11-year-old who experienced social and environmental injustice while her parents worked as strawberry pickers, essential people who play a large role in our food system. She would see how her parents would come home dehydrated, hopeless, and to an empty refrigerator. There's always curiosity and sorrow in her eyes as to why she would go to bed hungry, knowing her parents who work directly in the food system, who work directly in picking and packing food, would come home to no food on their table. This 11-year-old wanted to learn more and decide for herself that she wanted to go to work as a strawberry picker. She wanted to see what is happening. Why are her parents working so hard to come home to an empty refrigerator? She saw her parents, campesinos, sacrificing their bodies by working 10+ hours in extreme hot weather, backs bent down, while rapidly picking strawberries. There is constant pressure and yelling. Apúrense que la cosecha es para ahora. Si no quieren trabajar, váyanse a la casa. Hurry up. The harvest needs to be finished today. If you do not want to work anymore, then leave. Leaving could not be considered an option for them. If they wanted to have any food on their table, they would stay and move forward. I am that 11-year-old girl. I, Elizabeth Hernandez, born and raised in Watsonville, California. I worked as a strawberry picker along with my parents to see for myself. I wanted to come here to amplify the voices of the unseen. I want you to see what is going on in our food system. I graduated from the University of California, Davis in sustainable agriculture and food systems because my parents always said, "Mija, no queremos que trabajes en el campo. Queremos que te concentres en tu educación para que no tengas que sacrificar tu cuerpo como lo hacemos nosotros. Daughter, we do not want you to work in the fields. Focus on your education so you do not have to sacrifice your body like we do." And with that, I am here today to tell you about our system. I can see what is wrong with our system, but can you? I saw all the injustices my parents, my community have faced. I saw the inhumane treatment towards them. There are cases of sexual harassment for the woman. There was yelling, there and threats, and then there's our climate change. Heat stress is one of the many things the campesinos have dealt with. They worked in the direct sun for hours. Imagine feeling dehydrated and constantly feeling there's not enough water in the world to remove the thirst, and then even dehydrated to hold your bladder because there are no bathrooms nearby. And to be pressured to work in a rapid pace, picking, to finish packing the food that you can't even afford to purchase yourself. This is our food system, a system that only others who are privileged benefit from. And to those who are privileged, I am asking you, do you see us? Do you see the campesinos picking your food while California was burning down? Did you see the campesinos picking your food during a global pandemic? Yes, we need a sustainable food system, but we also need an equitable food system. We cannot have one without the other. A system where everyone can have equal access to food, to good food, and where everyone in the system is treated with dignity. I thank you and appreciate that you are here today because it means that, like 11-year-old girl, that you are curious too. You want to learn. You want to learn how you can support and make changes. There are short-term solutions, the now. Now you can donate to mutual collectives that are directly working with the campesinos in their community. Most of them do not even qualify for the aid provided from our government. Second, allow more opportunities to amplify our voices. The system can change if we speak up. Amplify the voices of the marginalized groups. And there are long-term solutions. Change takes time. I understand. So let's work to give opportunities to those who face injustices because of policymakers. Policies that are livable wages and health care for both the campesino and families. There is not enough time for me to tell you everything that is wrong with our current system or the many possible solutions. I ask you that are privileged and have the socioeconomic advantage to open your eyes, open your mind, and open your hearts and see that you benefit from our labor. Can you see that the system provides food for the privileged while exploiting the marginalized? Can you see the system we have in place? Can you see that we are essential to get food to your table? To our policymakers right now, despiértense, mira, wake up and see the system you have in place. Do your part to make sure the campesinos are treated with dignity. Y para mis campesinos, gracias por su labor esencial. Juntos vamos a salir adelante. Now, here's a strawberry box that carries a lot of sacrifice. It carries social and environmental injustice, and it carries hope. I have hope that you will finally see us. My name is Elizabeth Hernandez, and I am the voice of the campesinos.
Next, we will be hearing from Mireya Gomez-Contreras, she, her. Mireya identifies as Latina, has been engaged in movement building to uplift her community since she was young, and has a passion for using arts and culture to connect people and ideas. She is co-leader of Esperanza Community Farms, a system-changing sustainable community agriculture project focused on increasing food security and good health among low-income families from under-resourced communities in the Pajaro Valley.
Transformational sustainable change is possible. I know this because of my story, and my entry point for climate change is community-based agriculture. I grew up with my parent farm workers, and I learned really early on and very quickly that everything I need, everything we all need to be healthy and to live comes from the earth. So I care about the natural environment. And now that I'm a mother and I work at a community-based organic farm, I take my daughter there and my son, and they're learning about transformative change as well. We see it. We see it when we plant the seeds and we watch the plants grow, and we're able to cultivate, we're able to chop up our lettuce and eat it and feel good. My daughter is interested in being smart, and I tell her, being smart means paying attention. It means analyzing and reflecting. And I remember doing that when I was a little girl, working in the fields with my parents. My parents are farm workers. And I've carried that through. Now that I'm a mother, now that I've reflected enough and analyzed enough, and I'm able to relate to this particular social problem of climate change, I know my story is part of the solution. I know that from what I've seen and what I've experienced, that my story is a necessary part of the solution. And as far as I'm concerned, and based on my professional experience in the nonprofit sector, in which I've worked for over almost 25 years, there's a couple of problems, there's a couple of roadblocks that I want to tell you about, because we need to address those. We need to do it together. One is this idea of centering people of color voices. The organic farm where I work, it's a team of 4 people of color and a couple of people who identify as indigenous, who grew up in a culture that that valued cooperation over competition, for example. I've learned a lot with this particular team, and I've learned a lot in the environment, in this particular environment of an organic farm. What it means to center people's voices is to not just invite them to be a member. What it means to center people's voices means not checking off the demographic box. It means to invite them to listen deeply. It means inviting them to influence your decision. It means inviting them to make the decision, to follow their lead. And the more powerful part of that particular thing, to follow their lead, is to lead at their side. Because we all have growing to do. People of color in particular, me and my parents and my family. I've noticed and I've seen a pattern of how it feels and what it looks like to not have power. As a nonprofit administrator, I've worked my way from coordinator and job developer and manager, and I'm deputy director now. And I'm proud to be, and I take it very seriously that I'm in a formal position of power and authority. And I did not know what to do with that power originally. So I think people of color, I have had to do work to hold this power responsibly. And there's power that someone else had to give up to share with me. And that's what it looks like to act and to center the voices of people of color. What will it mean for you to share your overabundance? And how can you be intentional about that? And how can you base that on relationships? And how can you grow your relationships to be more diverse? I feel so much hope. I never thought I would when I was a Brown Beret and I was protesting with my signs and I was looking at police as the other. And I find myself feeling hope and really feeling abundance. And I get to see the abundance on the farm, and I get to share the abundance with community. And that's why I know, and I work for, that transformational, sustainable change that is possible. And I invite you to be intentional in the decisions that you make every day with your resources. And I invite you to consider the earth as you make decisions. Because like I'm teaching my little girl, and like I learned at a young age, and as we address social problems like climate change, no one will argue with the fact that all we need to live and live healthy and live equitably comes from the earth. My name is Mireya Gomez-Contreras, and I invite us to be more in action and do less talking.
Next, we'll hear from Chris Ragland. Chris Ragland, he, him, identifies as Black and grew up in San Pedro, Los Angeles, next to the second biggest port in the world, surrounded by 5 oil refineries where many of his friends and family members worked. Recognizing the lack of diversity in ocean spaces, Chris is on a mission to make the ocean a safe, healing space for BIPOC.
Let's admit it. Last year was a yard sale for injustices in this country. And what we learned was, no, the price is not negotiable, and it's all gotta go. We've done our dip through disillusionment, and now we're in the learning and reflection phase, the now what phase. How am I going to straighten out the intersection of climate change, equity, and people? Now, climate equity implies that privileged people, particularly white-run environmental orgs and agencies, need to disproportionately support and include non-white people. What you'll hear in these discussions is that minorities need a seat at the table, and we need to meet them where they are. Don't expect them to call into a city council meeting at 1 p.m. and rant about a carbon emissions policy. It's just not going to happen. Look, I don't have any answers, but I do have ideas on how to reconnect our BIPOC youth in this country. And one is a project called the Sea League. It's a little league of the ocean of sorts. It's an accessible, equitable, fun introduction to the ocean that's culturally representative of our youth, of our population. Let's submerge our youth in the life force of this planet, building relationships with the world that we're asking so many to care about. And the spark for this project came from a question: what is an environmentalist? My mom is responsible for making the water my element. And people show up for what they love. And my white mom made me love the ocean. But when anyone says, oh, black folks don't like the outdoors, it's so much more complicated than this. That statement sweeps the complexities of any BIPOC narrative under the rug. So when we hear we can't go to the beach, or even worse, only white people do that, and we don't want to do what they do, you can't be black and surf. The catch with me is that my mom was white. So she always told me, don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do something. So if your past distorts your consciousness, your present, in this case your presence, transforms it. You need energy to change. You need energy to heal. And where does that energy come from? Your culture. What you see and do. It's where your imagination to be a lawyer, musician, basketball player, president, environmentalist comes from. Sports is what resonates with my experience the most. So is Little League a social justice org? Is AYSO a social justice org? They're creating opportunities for kids to become the athletes that we know and love, the people that represent us. I'm trying to make environmentalists. So my project, the Sea League, it's not a new idea, but the context is. The pitch is no sidelines. Your team holds you accountable to show up. You try hard, and you take risks. If you don't want to compete, you don't have to. Surfing is hard. It takes 2 years to suck. So practice is also the game, because you're only playing against yourself anyway. Everyone plays Little League. Black, white, everything in between. And I have plenty of white friends that don't go deeper in the water than their waistline. This is my idea for getting all kids into the environment, by dissolving the term environmentalist and making it basic. It's just what we do and what we love. And we protect what we love. 100 years from now, I want people to say environmentalist. There's a word for someone that wants clean air and clean water and food that doesn't kill you and space to live your life. Weird. My name is Chris Ragland, and I want every child to love the ocean.
And our last video, before we go into a dialogue with our speakers, is from Karina Moreno. Karina Moreno, she, her, ella, grew up in Watsonville, California, and identifies as a queer Mexican woman. Karina wants to work with local youth because she never saw anyone who looked like her in science and STEM roles as she was growing up.
I consider myself very lucky in that I was very exposed to the outdoors during my childhood, and I was able to develop a really strong connection to nature. Unfortunately, I also grew up thinking that the only job I could aspire to have was to become a veterinarian. It wasn't until I got to college that I discovered my passion for biology and sustainability and conservation. But even then, I was so hesitant to pursue my newfound passion because I couldn't think of one person in the field that looked like me. And I thought that meant something. And I'm not gonna lie, that fear froze me and almost caused me to turn away from my pursuit. But I had a really great support system that didn't let me, and I wanted it really bad. So in the summer of 2016, I had the great opportunity, thanks to One People, One Reef organization, to go 7,000 miles out of my comfort zone to the Federated States of Micronesia. There, I got to work alongside the local youth to study their coral reef biodiversity. But I also got to see firsthand how this amazing group of people that lives in such harmony with their natural world and that takes only what they need were already being affected by climate change. It was then that I realized exactly what scientists had determined when they said that low-income communities would be affected first and hardest by climate change. Back home, we were still arguing about recycling, but here I was seeing piles of trash washing up on their shores, and their food source was disappearing. That experience changed me in so many deep ways, but being immersed in their beautiful culture was like holding up a mirror and seeing my home reflected back to me. It was then that I realized that it would be my hometown being affected first and hardest by climate change, exactly like it was happening on the island of Ulithi. Since then, it has been my mission to inspire passion in other young scientists of color in my community. If we are going to protect our home, we first need more people to believe that we can. It is a sign of a broken system that I went my whole life pursuing a job and not my passions. And I don't want any other Black, Indigenous person of color to ever think that they are not entitled to pursue their passions too. So I spend my time supporting great organizations where I have a valued seat at the table to share my experiences and my voice. Organizations like the Watson to Wetlands Watch that helps to connect local youth to their environments, and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Watch program that helps students conduct their first experiments from fieldwork to poster presentations. I'm working towards the day that no one will question their capabilities simply because of their skin color or socioeconomic background. That requires changing the way things are done now and working together to instill hope and confidence in all of our youth. Our communities cannot do it alone. We need help and more seats at the table to work together and grow. I've taken my seat. Please take yours. My name is Karina Moreno, and I want you to join me at the table.
So we're going to go ahead and use this next 30 minutes or so to have our fellows answer one particular question, but then we will also use that time for some Q&A from the audience. So if Will and Layla, Michelle, Karina, Elizabeth, Mireya, if you can show your faces. Hi, everyone. It feels kind of weird that we didn't get to connect until now, which it's 5:11. So it looks like we have about 45 minutes before the end of this event. And before we dive into the question that we put together, I just want to thank you guys for all of your hard work that you've put into this fellowship. We are so super proud of you guys. And it's just hard for me to like watch your videos and not tear up because you're all such powerful speakers and the messages that you bring are so important. So thank you for being here. I want to go ahead and ask the question that you guys have already seen. But before I do that, is there anything that any one of you guys want to say in this moment after having seen your videos for the first time in public like that? No?
I'd like to share something. And that is just that I hadn't actually paused to think about the power behind the collection of stories. I think it's something I'm to do to this pattern and to do something with that observation of like, to be able to identify the pattern across stories and to use that to inform our work. And I So I'm like super humbled and grateful to be a part of this group and to have heard all of our stories together. Yeah, there's more to come for sure.
Yeah, we feel exactly the same way. I mean, when we got everyone's stories back to back, I've watched them, 4 or 5 times just to, see. I guess part of what's really impressed me, aside from your powerful messages, is to have a collection of you front and center like you are. We just don't have those opportunities to see one another very often. So for me, it's like breathing and essential. And I just wanted to point that out. Anyone else? Karina?
I just want to say how liberating this has been. It's really isolating to want to be able to do something and not know how or where to start. But hearing your stories, all of your stories together has like really helped me not feel so alone. And I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I'll stack after Karina. Just stacking on what both of you have said, this has been truly fulfilling for me and a part of my healing journey. And I'm truly honored that each of you are part of it with me, and coming forward with a story like that, which I was surprised as the first because it's incredibly intense, but nevertheless, I think something and a part of me that felt compelled to share it with you all. And I wanted to thank you all for creating a safe space where each of us could grow and share our powerful stories. I'm truly honored to, after hearing all of us and all of your stories, to be a part of this cohort with you.
Well, we haven't really spoken very much about the entirety of the fellowship, but this is the culminating event of a longer program that this group has been a part of. And it began with a selection process that we put out to the entire state of California. And so amongst everybody that applied, we of course picked very carefully the kinds of individuals that we wanted to see reflected in this program. And also you got to attend a training day with Paul Ortiz and Irene. Can any of you speak a little bit about that, since our audience doesn't really know that part of it? Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, and that speaks to the training day with Paul and the other folks that taught us a lot about sharing stories and just how to get involved and elevate the movement. That speaks to points that a lot of these folks here made. It's really about putting your boots on the ground and learning what needs to be done. A lot of folks talked about that, and it's about connecting. And to put in the words of Paul, he said, we need bodies on the line. Like, we don't need words, we don't need intentions. We need people to come to these events and show up and put themselves there and get involved. And that was really impactful, and that it stuck with me.
Absolutely.
I can share. Yeah, so just to piggyback off of Will, I live in the Central Valley, so it's kind of, the resources we have here are very limited and very scarce. And so the fact that we were able to get these trainings was it was like a blessing, because there's so many professionals and individuals who are people of color, and even those who are just allies who are doing the change and doing the work, but we're not really provided their experience or their, the opportunity to share space with them. So just being able to have this opportunity was very like eye-opening, because we're such a huge state and we come from different regions. And for me to be in the Central Valley and have this opportunity is very, I don't know, I was just very blessed, because kind of like we're oftentimes forgotten. The Central Valley is, the food basket of the world and the nation, but we have the highest food insecurity rates. And so I'm just grateful. And I want to thank all of you for, listening, joining in, and just being a part of this experience.
Well, we definitely knew that we wanted to select at least one person from the Central Valley. And then it was also very important for us to get representatives from our own community, which is Watsonville and Santa Cruz. And then, so can you, I don't think we had an opportunity to do this. Can each of you just quickly state the area, the geographic area that you're from? Michelle?
Santa Barbara and Ventura counties.
Layla?
East Oakland, California.
Karina?
I'm from Watsonville, California.
Will?
Santa Cruz, California.
Elizabeth?
Watsonville, California.
Mireya?
The Pajaro Valley region in Central California.
Chris?
From San Pedro, California.
And Paige?
Modesto, California.
Thank you. So the question that we are going to discuss, and when I say discuss, I'm going to put the question out there, and what I would like is for there to be an open dialogue, mostly amongst you guys. And I know that we've already explored this issue, some of you more in depth than others, but I thought it'd be nice to get another, get some more dialogue and some more understanding, and give you the opportunity to be more free-flowing around this topic. So the question is, how have your ethnic and cultural realities, not identities, realities, influenced your work in activism? Anybody want to go first? Start off?
I'll go for it. I've really been thinking about this question, and it's persistence, if I could sum it up in one word. I couldn't see myself doing anything else, you know, like in my talk, I alluded to it, like I was drawn to nature, especially the ocean, but I couldn't see myself just studying the environment. People were a big part of that, and people were being ignored, and I couldn't just turn my back on that and just study the environment and pretend like people weren't a part of it. And it takes persistence to try to address these problems that are there and that have been there, because they continue for a reason. But in that, I just feel like it's kind of like a part of me to do it. Like there's like something deep within me that like gives me meaning. And like when I feel like so discouraged doing the research, it's like, no, like keep going at it. Like it's like the problem that's continuing has this other thing that's pushing you to solve it as it keeps going. So it's like these two powers going against each other.
Anybody just jump right in.
Yeah, I can go. Something that this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about in general. And the realities bit for me in this work is that there's no industry standard. There's no like perfectly right way to represent an ethnicity or a culture. You know, there are like wrong ways that you can do it that people can agree on. But I always find myself having to either shapeshift or kind of be more quiet, depending on where I am and who I'm with and how long I've known certain people and how much trust there are in those spaces because of people's past experiences. And like it's you know, the term code switching always comes up for me in this kind of conversation, is how does my culture and my history relate to the people that are around me? If it doesn't, now I'm put in a position I have to switch up. And I'm doing that less now. And I'm finding that it is making some folks, you know, more uncomfortable when I care less about being so eloquent or being so, you know, well-spoken. But it's also fun. It's part of my heritage. So that's how I feel like this is coming up for me.
I like this question because it attempts to put all of us as people of color and environmentalists and activists at the very center of the conversation, and I appreciate the intentionality. I can't help but kind of want to take the question apart a little bit. I think about what culture means. I mean, if culture is a set of beliefs and traditions and practices, then, you know, what I learned growing up around practices around how to be in relationship with the earth, that informs my work. When I think about the beliefs that I have about the sacredness of like how the earth represents ancestors, you know, and the rocks are our grandparents, like that informs my work. You know, when I think about culture, in terms of language, like I'm fully bilingual all day long, everywhere, you know, and I appreciate, Chris, what you just said about like showing up authentically. That's how I interpreted what you said, but like the power of, wow, what is possible the day that we all show up authentically in this world. That blows my mind. I think that the last thing that I think about with this question is that I forgot the specific thing, but the thing that comes to mind right now, and I'm trying to embody authenticity, is there's a lot of power in like the duality, or like the recognition and the value of people, of recognizing people's intersectionalities, and the way in which a lot of us now in the world really straddle different worlds. And I really have gravitated toward the term cultural interpreter, because it really allows a kind of graceful moving around different spaces and with different people. And that's a tool that just kind of grows. For me, it has grown my circles and my ability to relate to people differently. And it's through relationships that at the very end of the day that change happens. And change takes a long time, but it's through relationships. And I want to be in relationship with people different than me. That's not always been the case.
I want to echo Chris. Yes, Paige again. And so for me, it's kind of like I had to always kind of like code switch to kind of survive. You know, I came to this country when I was 12 years old, and I didn't really have a sense of belonging or placement. And so I had to like either fit in with the Chicanos or, you know, the African Americans. And I was never really secure with who I was. And I kind of like lost my identity because I was lost from my people, my language, my culture. And so for me, it's kind of like, how do I, as a 27-year-old, you know, woman of color, how do I bring back my cultural roots and also tie that in with the mainstream American way of life, where I can kind of use that as a platform to advocate for youth. You know, last month in May was AAPI Heritage Month, but then when you think about it, when you think of AAPI, you just think of the Asian American population, and we oftentimes forget about the Pacific Islander population. So it's kind of like wherever I'm at, we're always kind of invisible, in, you know, in terms of categories, in terms of, you know, placement in the American system. So it's kind of like the work I do, I try my best to, like, you know, bring my authentic, like Mireya said, authentic, you know, Palauan pride with me, because I wanted to showcase to, you know, the very minimal amount of youth that we have in this country that, hey, we may be like 1% of the population, but you know what? If I can get here, you can get here as well. And so it's all about, you know, sharing that knowledge and sharing that wealth and, you know, your education to those who are needing it, and, you know, just sharing that with everyone else. So it's not like, I don't know, there's so many barriers, and I just feel like categories and identities are kind of like in the gray area. So just, you know, being authentic and just, you know, bringing your true self and speaking from personal experiences will definitely make changes in our youth and our future generations. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on what you were saying, Paige, because everything that you just said really resonated with me. Having grown up in the city of Santa Barbara and Goleta, two separate cities, and myself being Filipina, it is an incredible bubble. And I also felt, not obviously white to be with my white friends, but also not, Hispanic or Latine to be with them. And so I was always kind of like the outlier in my community growing up. And so the cultural realities that inform my work is, right, I came as a very young immigrant from the Philippines to Santa Barbara. And as an immigrant, in order to survive in this country, we had to live in, you know, multi-generational households. And so I grew up with a, you know, like, you have to, you know, we came over here because we have to be successful. We gave you this chance. You have to actually succeed. And I grew up with a sense of duty and obligation to the, and I'm going to borrow from my relatives on the Pacific Islands, that, you know, at any one point, we have 7 generations that we're thinking of. And at any one point, you're interacting with 5 generations. You have yourself, your children, your grandchildren, your parents, and your grandparents. And luckily for me, I go way back, and I still have my great grandmother who is 104 years old. But we have 2 generations that we're never going to meet. The grandchildren and the great grandchildren will never meet, and the ancestors before us who will never get to meet. And always operating out of a sense of obligation, which in some ways is a blessing because it guides my work. But also sometimes it's a curse, because it's hard to break tradition, especially when it's supposed to, when you're feeling like that's an opportunity to grow. And so some other cultural realities, and on top of the lack of representation that I see, and I love my friends who shared this with me, but it wasn't until university that I learned about the Filipino manongs, or the older brothers, who actually contributed to the labor strikes. And shortly after the Delano grape strikes, that was when they approached Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta to create an intercultural collaboration and solidarity to earn agricultural workers their labor rights. And so that kind of beautiful intercultural solidarity that was so missing and key to that I think should be more key to the education of our young ones, and how glaringly missing it was for me as like one of the few Asian people, or even less Filipino people in my community, really strikes home for me. And the fact that so many of us, especially in the California coast, we have had a long relationship with California. You know, the first Filipinos actually landed in the late 1400s, early 1500s on Morro Bay. And we've had a long relationship with this land. And many of you might know us to be your nurses, your elderly parents, and home service worker. And culturally, we have an importance and reality that we are healers. We have a long history, and in albularios, which are healers. And so for me, while I'm not myself following the family, my own mother and each of her siblings being nurses, I'd like to say, it's hard for me to judge because I'm biased for myself, but I'd like to say that I'm a healer for the earth along with you all.
You hit on some really important stuff. The whole idea of, I think the thing that I've always struggled and have always tried to make sense of is this pressure to be more individualistic. You know, when I immigrated from Mexico, I didn't realize that feeling of it's you're on your own kind of thing was something I was going to always have to struggle with, because the only way I know how to do things is in community. Like nothing else makes sense to me. So yeah, I mean, it's so critically important. The whole idea of intercultural solidarity is something that is really a big topic in the work of the work that that this center perpetuates, the Research Center for Nonviolence, is always learning how can we connect with other communities. And as we look at this work that we're doing, or the climate justice work, the ocean and climate justice work, we have to do it in community. We can't, this is not a game to be won by one people. So we got to break through that like tomorrow.
May I? You triggered a thought. Unless someone else wants to speak, already spoken. Yeah, I started to answer a question in the Q&A box. You brought something up that I've been playing around, and I need to build a little courage to say it, but I feel the courage to say it. And I'll say that, you know, in this last year and a half, as equity becomes a sexy thing in lots of sectors and arenas, and which will go away, and there'll be another sexy thing to fund. I hope a lot of it stays, though. There's the growth that I'm experiencing myself and seeing in the institutions where I work, and even in noticing at a cultural, like societal level, like the narrative is changing, and the change that I'm seeing is a shift from valuing only white supremacy cultural values, you know, the worshiping of the written word, the sense of urgency, the either or thinking, you the individualism, Silvia, that you just mentioned. And I think for a long time, what I was trying to do was I was trying to take it the other way. Like I was trying to move or shift at least the way that I was in the world, the way that other people were in the world, to the other extreme, be cooperative, and to, you know, to shift from either or to and, right, to combine ways of doing things, and from individuality to cooperation or interdependence. And I guess my insight in this last year and a half, as I've been watching what's happening around me, is that there's actually room and there's a need for acting with urgency sometimes. You know, my daughter wants to turn the knobs on the stove, and I have to be a dictator. I have to act with urgency. And okay, that's not related to, that's not an example of addressing climate change, but it's an example of how urgency is needed at the right times. Individualism is needed at the right times. I had to go to lots of therapy to heal my personal self. That I have to do that by myself, with myself, to love myself. But I also need to be with all of you if I want to make institutional change, you know, cultural change. And of course, yeah, like with lots of different communities and sectors, to be able to change the narrative, you know, like the social narrative about what it means to show up for the earth, what it means to have that 7-generational mind frame that Michelle talked about. So there's room, I think that there's room, right, again, for not just supremacy cultural values. Those are not wrong, but they're incomplete, an incomplete package. And now how do all of our voices and our stories inform an expansion of not just urgency, but the natural organic pace, right? Not just individualism, but interdependence and cooperation, right? Anyway, you triggered that thought, Silvia, and I appreciate that.
Thank you for that. I want to ask if Elizabeth and Layla, you haven't spoken, and maybe I think Karina, think you spoke. Do either one of you have something to add before we sign off and hand it over to Gail? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Wonderful. This question, for me, I personally had to assimilate a lot. I had to let go a lot of my culture to be in the positions I am now. And my journey with water has really been able to reconnect myself to my spiritual and cultural connections that I had to let go of so much. And I didn't understand how powerful it could make me. The feeling I get when I go to the ocean, the high tides, I feel so powerful. And it wasn't until I did this work that I would know that that's why I feel so powerful. It's because my ancestors would go there. And so becoming an activist doing this work, it just grabbed me by the hand and just took me along. I never ever thought or see myself being an activist for the earth, but it is something that everyone needs to like recheck themselves and to reconnect And so, yeah, my journey has just been being able to reconnect and be okay with who I am. I don't have to let go of my culture.
Yes, I want to echo Layla. Layla's story really resonates with me because we grew up in similar, I feel like, areas where we didn't have a lot of resources. I grew up in a low-income house. My refuges were the library and the outdoors because they were free. And I was okay with that because I didn't know any better. But having that connection with nature and wanting to pursue it was so conflicting for me in my culture of graduate high school, go to college, get a good job, and get ahead. I didn't know what passion was. I thought that was, for rich people. Getting a job that you actually enjoy doing, not for me, and then the path that it took me, it was very lonely. I was the only one. I couldn't connect with a lot of people. I learned how to code switch, like Chris said. And it wasn't until, I did get deeper and started working through those shames of where I came from and stopped trying to hide it and started connecting with my culture. I realized, my ancestors, this is what they did. This connection isn't just a fluke. I'm not going on some weird path. Like, this is what my people do. My people were so connected to nature. My people were so loving and worked together. And so that is the message that I'm trying to share, and that Watsonville Wetlands Watch and that the Monterey Bay Current Watch program provides in our town of Watsonville, these resources. Because I really had no idea that science was an option for me. I thought I was either going to go into business, and programs like that, if you can volunteer, if you can help, they make huge differences.
Elizabeth?
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you all for sharing everything you said. A lot of it can resonate. And, I'm the last to speak maybe right now because when I read the question, culture, ethnicity, it's like, I don't know what you're asking. It's like, I don't know, like, who am I, Like, it's something that I question myself because I've always had other people identify me. They're always like, oh, you're a Latina. Oh, you're Chicana. And it's like, yeah, I think I'm a Latina. Yeah, I think I'm a Chicana. But, just like in my bio and how you introduced me today, Sylvia, you said that I identify as Mexicana. And I learned that through this fellowship. I learned that here, that yes, I am Mexicana and that is how I identify. I am Mexicana because my parents are immigrants who came from Jalisco, Mexico. I am Mexicana because my culture involves however my parents learned in Mexico, and they passed along their traditions and their culture. And I had so much trouble answering this question, like, what is like my cultural reality? And it's like, I always thought like that I was a Latina because that's how people would point me as. It's like, oh, you're Latina, huh? And it's like, or like even person of colors as well. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm a person of color, but I'm also a person of the global majority. That's another term that I think it's really important. It's like, instead of putting ourselves as a minority, no, we are people of the global majority. There's a lot of us. We're an entire community here. And yeah, I'm just very proud to say that, I identify as a Mexicana. I learned, that's why I'm here today, because of my parents. They've suffered so much. They sacrificed their bodies so much. And I'm tired of that. I'm tired of watching them, come home tired. And, I've myself have witnessed, I myself had food insecurity. I would come home to no food, and being the oldest of four, there is this thing where I would make sure that my siblings ate before me. I would make sure to not be weak and to be the strong one in my family. I made sure that everyone ate, even if I went to bed hungry. As long as my parents and my siblings, as long as they had food, I was fine. Especially my parents, because they're the ones who are bringing food to the table. They are the ones who are picking our food. And just like I said in my story, they're the ones working through this pandemic. California was literally burning down. And what gear did the campesinos have? Nothing. They, if anything, just maybe a bandana. You know, but there's so much hope here in our community, especially here in Watsonville, California, because during the wildfire season, I was outraged by the fact that there is no N95 masks available. I literally used my social media to ask anyone if they had any extras. And you know what happened? Our community came through. Our community worked together to gather N95 masks, either by like purchasing them and, you know, asking from other local counties or other like local states. Like I literally had people shipping them to my house, and I created care packages, you know, just to support and go out there to support the campesinos where my dad was working, and just telling them thank you and appreciating them, because they're the ones out there through this entire situation. They're still out there, and you know, summer is coming, and just like our climate change, we know what's coming already. We've seen it last year, how California was burning down. We know that there's gonna be more wildfires. And I hope, again, our community can come through, and not just our community, but the policymakers. Just like I said in my story, it's up to the policymakers, because we reached out to the ag commissioner and they couldn't provide us with masks. You know, it's like, no, this is it. Policymakers, if you're watching right now, we need to step up. You know, we need to make sure that these campesinos are working with dignity, that they have the essential things. Like it just doesn't make sense that, you know, these are the essential workers, but yet they can't even have a mask, you know. I don't know. I am so proud of myself right now. I am proud of everyone too. You know, this fellowship made me realize, you know, through the trainings, through all of you all here today, through our community, I found my drive. I know what more I'm going to do. I know there's only one of me right now, but I know that I can inspire you all today and in the future. And I know that working together as a community, we're gonna get so far. And just my last quote here is that something that my dad always says is that juntos vamos a salir adelante. Together, we are going to move forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your powerful words. Thanks to all of you beautiful people. Gail, where are you, Gail?
Wow, I am so honored to be here with all of you today. This has been just amazing, and we did get some questions in through the chat. I think we only have time probably to take one, and I did find one that I think might kind of go along with the dialogue that you all have already been having. We do need to save a few minutes for thank yous at the very end. So the question that I'd like to look at is, what is the role of intergenerational trauma to our relationship and engagement with the environment from the perspective of disadvantaged communities? And since all of you have been so graciously sharing your personal stories today, and I know none of you are speaking as experts in this particular realm, for anyone out in the audience that doesn't know intergenerational trauma, it's defined as trauma that gets passed down from those who directly experience an incident to subsequent generations. And I'm wondering if any of you would like to share anything on this topic from your own experience or your family experience.
I can go really quickly, briefly on this topic. This question reminds me of the discussion Gail, Sylvia, and Will and I had about water and how Black communities have been separated. That connection to water has been severed to the point where so many of us don't even know how to swim. We were fearful of water. Going around water, it was something we could never be access to. And so that disconnect was generational. You know, my family, my mother, my grandmother, they have no idea how to swim. And I feel that that does not get talked about enough, that severed connection to nature, to water, that's generational. You know, when the civil rights movements were happening and Blacks and whites could actually be in the same spaces, they would actually cement up all of the water spaces, all the swimming pools, so Blacks and white people can never even swim together. Yeah, so water for me is generational, and I do believe that Black people, my people, really need to reconnect. It's been generational that we've been taken away from water.
Does this thank you, Layla. Is this bringing anything up for anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add how nature really isn't a safe space for people of color, which is really unfortunate because, like, at least for my culture, you know, we make up such a huge part of the workforce in agriculture and, you know, and just customer service in general. Like, my people work so hard, work themselves to the bone, and then have no release, no connection to nature, to what their ancestors had connection from. And I know that's intergenerational. I know Mexicans have been brought here, and people of color have been brought here, and this whole country has been built on their backs, on their workforce. And I think that is what we're seeing with this disconnection to nature and keeping them segregated and keeping them in areas with low resources. And that needs to stop. We need to be included. We need to be welcomed. And my people just need to go out there, kick the door open, be yourself, work through your shame. Ask yourselves why do I believe this? Who told me this? I had to do that for myself. All my limiting questions of why didn't I think I could become a scientist? Why did I not believe in myself? And I hope a lot of people watching today, you know, starts asking yourself those questions. Why do I believe that I don't belong here? Why do I believe Black people cannot swim? Why do I believe Mexican people can't hike? And ask yourself, you know, if you believe those things, why?
It's also bringing up something for me. In terms of intergenerational trauma, I think about how it's passed along, and I think it's passed along in terms of like wisdom and how much of our wisdom is shared orally and through families and through our community and our experiences with certain entities, whether it be an agency at the local level or a state or federal level. While I am not a member of this community, I do have friends who had to wrestle with whether or not they would take an internship from an environmental organization because of how badly or historically that organization has actually displaced their peoples and then for the sake of conservation. They've actually displaced tribal peoples to serve land but for their own purposes. I think about, an example of recent trauma is the Fukushima Daiichi power plant corruption, and how that has radically changed the way that Japan looks at where they're getting their energy from, and how it's completely at a base and societal level shifted their perspective on a whole sector of carbon-free energy. And for me, when I think of intergenerational trauma, and in my experience, I think of the ways that in some ways agencies or government has failed us in trying to protect our, for example, non-English speaking neighbors from wildfires or sudden onset emergencies or disasters, lack of translation services, inability or lack of preparedness and assistance and preparedness, leaves a traumatic experience where in some ways we've had to, through these unfortunate mistakes, we've had to gather this wisdom of lived experience and increase our own resiliency and capacity to respond to environmental degradation and disaster. So I think about those communities and those events.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anyone have a last thing to share on this topic?
Yes, please. Oh, go ahead, Karina. I'll go after you.
I just want to add super quick. When I'm saying that there's a disconnection between my community and nature, I just remember that I was volunteering with Monterey Bay Aquarium Watch program, and every year they take them to the beach. And Watsonville is a coastal town, and there were high schoolers that had never even been to the beach. We are a coastal town, but that is how separated and disconnected we are.
I was going to briefly share. So I think for myself, my people have always been, traumatized through land colonization and displacement. And so I feel like, prior to the World War, we saw many large nations like Germany and other European countries, kind of like pretty much capitalize over my island where I come from. And so for me, after seeing all the effects of the climate crisis, and now there's warning sea level rises, and knowing that, I will always never have like a solid place to be because there's so many developed nations who are causing these issues, and these are large scale issues that are affecting smaller nations. I look back and I think of my ancestors were wayfinders, right? Like they traveled throughout the entire Pacific Ocean with just no compass, just a canoe made out of tree trunk or whatever, and then they had to literally survive off of like the ocean, the land. And so for me, it's kind of like, how do I, currently in California, how do I team up with, like Mireya mentioned, other communities of color and just communities who are facing any kind of issues? How do I make this my new home, and how do I make this a better home for future generations? So yeah, I want to end with that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Paige. Again, it's just been such an honor to be with all of you today. I'm so grateful. I do think we need to switch back to our slide presentation to do our thank yous at this moment, but all of you, thank you so very much. And we had a question in the chat about where to watch the recording. It will be posted on the Save Our Shores YouTube channel. So to find that, you can go to saveourshores.org and get there. But if you did register for the event, we'll also include a link to the recording in a follow-up email. So thank you, everybody. We have right now a slide thanking our trainers, these experts who came out to do a special training for all of our fellows back in April. Dr. Michael Mendez is the author of Climate Change from the Streets, How Conflict and Collaboration Strengthen the Environmental Justice Movement. Dr. Paul Ortiz, author of An African American and Latinx History of the United States. Irene Tusaprik, who is our local licensee and curator for the TEDx Santa Cruz, and also has curated TEDx Youth in Timfu, and also TEDx Timfu, and Wilson Liviano, the managing editor of the Ground Truth Project. So thank you so very much for these wonderful people who came out and shared their expertise with us. And we would like to thank our sponsors, Santa Cruz Works, who's been helping us today with the event, the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative, Community TV, Keith Gudger came out and spent an entire day recording all of the beautiful videos that we shared today, Good Times, Ecterra, and also Altera Solar. So thank you very much to our sponsors. And last but not least, we would like to thank all of the wonderful groups who both helped us to spread. Many of these groups helped us to get the application around throughout the state of California. We did have many applications come in, and we're super grateful for that. And then all of these groups helped to promote today's summit. So much gratitude, so much positive energy in the room. Thank you all. We will be in touch with next steps. Sylvia, would you like to say a closing thought?
Just thanks to everybody that's here, all our fellows and all the participants. And, you know, this whole project has really been an act of love, I guess, on behalf of myself and Gail and our organizations. And I hope you felt that. Thank you.
We've really enjoyed meeting all of you, both in person and through our digital realm. So thank you all so very much. We're excited to see next steps from all of you, and we'll be in touch. So, and everybody who is here in the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
It's been incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.